if a brand is heavily reliant on an individual person, usually part of the acquisition is going to request that person to work within the firm within 1, 2 to 3 years. For someone with my set of skills, 20-year doing this and dedicating my life towards my career, with countless amount of certifications, with multiple masters, and been in the business for quite some time, with also experience within the legal industry, which is actually very hard to find.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Boulder SEO Marketing podcast. I'm Raulf, founder of Boulder SEO Marketing. We help local businesses get to the top of Google and in AI search using traditional search engine optimization, AI, SEO, and generative engine optimization. So this podcast cuts through the AI hype to bring on people getting real results. My guest today is Jason Dervieux. Jason, I hope I said your last name correct.
That's perfect.
All right, cool. Quick context on how we ended up here. So Jason was actually one of our clients. He ran marketing inside a fast scaling law firm where we were doing AI SEO work for. Earlier this year, Jason, you went out on your own and launched Scaling Law Firms, where you now operate as a fractional chief growth officer for law firms in the 2.5 to 45 million range. We actually reconnected a few weeks ago for what was supposed to be a quick catch up. I think it was nearly an hour long conversation because every topic you raised mapped to patterns we're seeing across the entire legal vertical. So today's conversation is squarely for law firm owners and the marketing folks running things inside firms. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be there.
I'm excited to talk about the many topics that I researched and came up with. Hey, very briefly, walk us through what scaling law firms actually does, and what are you building? Who are you serving?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, my approach is there's a quote that I use all the time is law firm owners build the law firm to win. And I built it or I engineer it to scale. So a lot of law firm owners once they start reaching that multi-million dollar mark, they're mostly coming from programs and masterminds like SMB Team or How to Manage Your Law Firm. And these programs are great, especially when you're starting and they're very tactic heavy. But it becomes to a point where law firms tends to outgrow that program and needs to really think strategically on how are they going to build momentum, not just on a local scale, but on a national scale. And so where I come in is I bring in my sets of knowledge and skills to be able to build a solidified foundation, making sure we fill in the cracks and making sure that you have an optimized process. So when you do decide to significantly scale beyond just a state border, you have the strong foundation that allows scalability. So my services are really based on providing fractional chief growth officer services for very few law firms. I don't do a lot, like 20, 30 law firms at a time. I'm very specific to only catching 3 to 5 max law firms to work with. Just so the goal here is to build really long-term relationship and to partner up with the law firm owners or the managing partners to really get that foundation in the right place to get them to the next stage of their growth.
Awesome. And then, so I just got off a call with my entire team and I quickly spoke with the people who you worked with directly. It's like, hey, give me a little bit of feedback about Jason. Did you like working with him? So according to my team, it was very positive feedback. You definitely the interactions that I had directly with you, very positive, very professional. So if you now
Thank you.
seen this from both sides, right? Inside a firm running marketing and outside as the strategic advisor, like what surprised you most about that shift?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird because before I joined the law firm I was working at, I had a marketing agency, which I ended up selling to a PR firm in New Jersey. And so I kind of understood that side of the business as well. And that's why I'm extremely picky with the agencies I hire. And that's why I chose you guys, really. And that's because it's very hard to find agencies that actually do the work and really go into the weeds and doing it right. And so, like, my experience so far is when I was working at the company I was at, it was basically why, like, my services I feel is the perfect fit because I don't think they were ready to have somebody in my position full time. What they needed was to reallocate a lot of what they were paying me as a salary towards building a small team of managers and directors to really help execute on the plan and the strategy. And so what happened is they hired me, which I'm pretty expensive on a full-time basis, but then I was not just the chief growth officer, I was also the director, I was also the agency manager, and we were trying to fill in the gap with freelancers. And so I was just really way too busy and constantly running around. Where now, because of my position and the service I'm providing, I'm much more strategic and I'm focusing on helping them build a team and focusing more on the strategy side and make sure there is accountability across all the different agencies they're using, as well as each individual team members. But from a difference perspective, I mean, I'm still doing kind of what I was doing, but more on the leadership side instead of getting into the weeds, which sometimes I always kind of have to do it if there is some sort of fire. I don't mind rolling up my sleeve and getting into it. But usually, what's nice about me being on my own is to be able to really focus on the leadership side of things and making sure they're building a proper team to help execute on that strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's dive into the more tactical aspect of this conversation. So let's talk about the hidden risk in scaling locations. A lot of law firms have multiple locations, and oftentimes they end up doing black hat SEO, not on purpose, but because somebody thinks it's a good idea to do this or that, right? So you wrote a piece recently about the hidden risk law firms take on when they scale locations the wrong way. Let's start there. What's the strategy that looks scalable on paper but is quietly building fragility?
Yeah. So, and sadly, this happens way too frequently. And
Yeah.
lawyers, specifically law firm owners, because of their personality types, which is high achievers and really always kind of pushing the line. Um, and first of all, they're lawyers, right? They're not business owners. They don't have a background in marketing. They don't fully understand how Google works and its complexities and algorithm and the bottom line of what's Google's goals, right? And so when an agency pitch an idea that may sound, I would say ethical to a certain point, they're very exposed to potentially hire an agency that build those types of risk and fragility within their law firms that could have a significant amount of damage in the long term. They may see a positive lift initially, but it builds fragility for long term, which could lead to a significant impact to their bottom line and even potentially hit a wall when it comes to trying to scale on a national level. And one of the recent one that some agencies are pitching is basically they try to charge $1,000 for a management fee of each Google My Business locations. And what they do is they try to identify a tiny little office that's really cheap, between $200 to $700 a month. They sign a lease, so now they have that address that matches, the minimum requirements for Google My Business. And then what they do is they use webinars that were pre-recorded to basically get people to sign up. So that creates lead generation. And then once they go through the webinar, they send them a message to provide a review of the webinars within those Google My Business locations. So ideally, what it does is it helps pump up the amount of review, which will allow and increase your visibility on a local scale. The problem is that some of those reviews will have, your webinar was great and all those different things. And the problem is it is sold as aligning with Google's policy, but it is not, right? Because there's nobody there. It's just an empty office. And then they're just basically using fake reviews because they're not actual clients to help pump up the exposure on a local standpoint. And so what this does is it creates a couple of conflict because the thing is the legal industry is similar to the medical field, right? The medical field has HIPAA regulations that you have to align with. And if you break those regulations, you could be very heavily penalized. Same thing with lawyers. Lawyers are in this unique situation where the consequences of them doing something of that sort could have a significant impact on their business itself. So, for example, not only Google will significantly impact them as a business standpoint, so it's not just going to impact them on a local SEO standpoint, but it's also going to impact them organically and even on paid search because they look at businesses as an entity, not just each channel separately. They all are connected, they all communicate with one another, and they have like a score grades for each individual companies. And so if you break the trust into one channel, that's going to basically spread out across the board. But going back to the potential risk, it has not only could you risk where Google identify that you're doing this and might significantly impact you in a way where they delist you from a local SEO standpoint, which could include maybe those locations where you have a lot of webinar reviews and maybe less so on the ones that are real, but it will definitely have a negative impact. And then you have all those leases that you are now committed to that you have to pay, but now you're not getting those leads that you thought you were going to get. But in addition to that, let's say you have someone that files a complaint to the bar that you're trying to falsify customer reviews for those geographic location, that could actually lead for you to permanently lose or have some sort of significant impact to your business. And if you have issues and let's say you lose your bar because you're using unethical practices, that could lead to potentially not being able to own the law firm. So that's
Wow.
another issue. And then I did some research with FTC, and then FTC, if somebody files a complaint, let's say a competitor is filing a complaint to FTC, they can charge you around, I think it's $52,000 per negative review, per reviews that are not real. Let's say they have webinars on it. So now you have the potential risk of losing a significant amount of leads for your business overnight. Then you could have issues with keeping, like the bar. And then third, you might get fined by the FTC based on the amount of reviews that are identified as not real reviews. So that could have a significant impact to your business.
Wow. 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 So I wrote down a few questions. One of the questions was, when is Google actually going to start to address this, enforce that? I can answer that. We actually answered that in last week's Friday SEO tip. Google is cracking down across the board now globally on like types of reviews that are really not legit. So you made a very, very strong point. I was actually not aware that it could impact a law firm like financially and even potentially get them out of business, right? This is interesting to hear, to say the least. Wow. Okay, let me see.
Right.
So, for our listeners who run multi-location businesses or who advise them, what's the diagnostic? How do they know if their current setup is a ticking time bomb versus a defensible footprint?
So that's a great question. And I think, first of all, we have to educate those business owners on how really Google works, right? So the key goal of Google is to make sure that the search results of people searching is the optimal, best possible results that's out there. Because what they want is they want people to keep coming back to Google and keep using them because that's how they're making their money through advertisement. And so by understanding that principle, now as a business owner, your key number one responsibility is to make sure that you are meeting all the necessary foundations for Google to clearly identify who you are, what you're doing, and why it matters. And then to make sure that you are somebody of authority so they can rank you higher, that you're providing valuable, insightful information, that you are providing excellent service to your customers so they can promote you on an organic standpoint because you're the ideal options to your consumer. And if you understand that foundation, then you understand that whenever something goes against those sets of foundation and you're trying to cut corners or you're trying to speed up the process, what that's going to happen is it's going to create those fragility. And usually when people are coming to you and saying, hey, buy some backlinks is going to help you boost up a variety of different things, it could, but it's going to help you short term until Google figures out a way to identify what's happening and then they'll ping you for that. And so really to be able to help identify those fragility point is number one is identify all the tactics that you're utilizing and making sure that aligns with Google's core goal, which is providing the best possible options to their users. And then second, if there is something where you're not fully sure, you could also use like Gemini or Claude AI or ChatGPT to help guide you and say, hey, we're doing this practice. Does that goes against Google's policy or not? What I like to do is usually pull all the information of those like Google policies and all those things and create a notebook LM note, put all that information, even from a lawyer's standpoint and even for agency, like there is a bunch of documents on what lawyers can and cannot do when it comes to advertisement. Collect all those documents, put it into that tool, and now you have a resource center where you can ask a question and validate if what you're doing makes sense, or even proofread the content that you're creating to help you identify the areas that could be questionable so you can make the proper adjustments so you're not put into that gray zone where it could lead to potential problems in the future. And then really it's about doing the right thing starting as soon as possible. Because if you already have built those fragility and you do have those reviews where it does says webinars and things like that, it's just like smoking, right? The quicker you quit, the better it's going to get. So I would recommend just making sure that you're pausing those types of practices and start really addressing, because there are ways where you can really significantly increase your customer reviews. One practice that I tend to recommend my clients is, first of all, put a system in place where you can collect surveys. My favorite question is the NPS score. How likely would you recommend, my services to friends and family, right? And then from 0 to 10, they're going to say 10 or 9, that's going to be a promoter, or 6 to 0, that could be a detractor. And then 7 and 8, those are just neutral people. They don't really care much. They don't really like you or hate you. They just are okay with your services, right? And then if they're scoring a 10 and 9 and they're considered promoters, those are the type of people you want to have an automated email to be sent to them and tell them, hey, would you mind taking 5 minutes of your time and giving us your experience, and then give them a link directly to the place where they can provide their reviews. And if you automate this whole process, now you're going to have consistency of good positive reviews that's going to be landing on Google My Business, and be able to help really drown those webinar reviews with good customer reviews that are validated, that are real customers. And even if you're expanding to different locations, you can change those links to different places. And then you can also expand it to not just Google, and then you can add Trustpilots and Yelps and all those different places. So now you have an ecosystem that helps drives and create a variety of those positive reviews across multiple platforms, which goes to a separate part of our conversation, which is, SEO everywhere, and making sure that you have an ecosystem that validates that you are someone of authority, that you are providing valuable services. And that would be the way I would recommend doing it.
Awesome. Before we tackle the next section, I'm going to put all the links to the information that I mentioned at the beginning right below in the description field of this YouTube video. If somebody needs to bolt now, Jason, how can somebody get in touch with you if they're interested in engaging with you?
Yeah, feel free to go to scalinglawfirms.com. You have my phone number. I have like an AI intake that's going to respond, but that's going to ask you a few questions. And then they'll schedule you in my calendar. And then ideally is I'll do some prep work before we have a conversation, and we'll have some time scheduled together to just see how I can help really your business.
Awesome. All right. Section 2, naming is an economic decision, not a creative one. So let's talk about why brand architecture firm name, domain, trademark, alignment, etc., determines exit value, very applicable to a lot of law firms out there, and AI search authority simultaneously. So your guide on law firm naming opens with a line that stopped me cold. You said most law firms make their naming decision in the first 90 days of formation, and it becomes a permanent constraint at the moment of greatest economic significance. Unpack that, please.
Yeah, so it's not really their fault in the sense where most lawyers, and I've heard so many crazy stories where people decide to just sell their retirements and really just or take a big loan on their house and really start getting on their own. And so their number one priority is survival, right? Making sure that they start landing clients or they have certain sets of clients, but making sure that they're building a business to help scale. So the quickest way, which is the storefront of your business, is a website, right? Today, your key hub of who you are and what you represent is going to be heavily reliant on your website. And so they have to have a website up as quickly as possible because that's where it's going to be where their leads are going to be generated. And that's where, the easiest way to be able to advertise and see positive results fairly quickly. And so because of those circumstances, they're trying to get something up and running very quickly. The main practice when it comes to law firms is utilizing their name as the brand of their business, right? So the law firm, what happens when you start using, let's say, your name, is that it's going to restrain you, and the law firm is going to be very heavily associated with who you are. And so you are going to become the brand of the firm. And the problem is, especially at the beginning, they might not have that vision that, 10 to 15 years from now, this company is going to be multi-million dollar company. And there is going to be a possibility for you to get acquired by a bigger law firm or something along those lines. And so that's why it's very important, especially at the beginning stages. What is the dream happening in the potential 5 to 10 years, and making sure that you're setting up and you have really the end insights on how you want to eventually exit your business, because that's going to help you identify what strategy or how should you be naming your business. There's a great example here is the company I used to work at. The name was the name of the owner, but yet the domain name was very SEO optimized, right? It was a keywords that they're trying to rank for, which is probably a previous SEO agencies that was recommending that strategy because it definitely helps, but it helps in the short term, right? Because it's
Right.
geographically located based on a service. But there's a few problems with that. But the key problem is if you name your law firm with your name, now you're the person. And so the value and the evaluation of your law firm is going to be directly connected to the reputation that you have been building. And so the business is not an independent entity, it's you. You're the business. And regardless if you have 50 lawyers working under you, the business is you, especially if you put your face and your name out there, you're going to be the business. Your name is what's driving that brand equity, that recognition, that trust. On the other hand, if you have a exit strategy where you're like, okay, I'm going to work 10 to 15 years, I'm going to build this business to $15 million, and my goal is to flip it and sell it. Well, the strategy from a marketing standpoint is going to be very different, but also your naming convention is going to be different, right? So there's a great company, it's called Modern Family Law, and that's the name of the business. So it's no longer, so we don't even know who's the owner of that business because the business is focusing on, they're trying to be the Modern Family Law. And so it's much easier for them to scale through a variety of different states and collect those low hanging fruits. So their cost per acquisition is much lower because they're much more adaptable and flexible. And then on top of that, because people will remember the name of Modern Family Law instead of someone specifically, when it's time to exit out and they would like to sell that company, the evaluation is going to be much greater because the brand equity is going to be directly aligned to the brand name itself. So instead of having the name of the owner, it's going to be based on the name of the company itself. So the trust is going to be associated and authority is going to be associated to Modern Family Law instead of whoever the owner of that firm is. So the evaluation is going to be very different because brand equity is critical. That's why when you think about Coca-Cola or McDonald's, those brandings are worth a huge amount of million, or like billions of dollars. And the reason is because of their recognition, their trust, their consistency over time. And it's the same principle with all the businesses. So if you're directly connected, or even if you have a rock style lawyer that becomes famous, well, then your brand, your business is going to be associated with that person, and so now that person has a lot more impact to the business. Let's say they leave, and that could cause, for a significant impact to your bottom lines. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers the question, but
Awesome. So as you probably know, at Boulder SEO Marketing, we built what we call virtual client architecture. So every client, and we started to roll that out. I think you were still there. Every client has a digital twin, like the virtual Mark, virtual Tom, virtual Irina, or even virtual business name, right? The whole point is to institutionalize knowledge so it doesn't walk out of the door with one person. Like, were you there? Were you still there? Did we implement that for you guys?
I think we were in the beginning of this conversation
Okay.
right before I left.
Yeah. So we now implement that aggressively for every client. I have a digital twin called the Ultimate Virtual Chris, where, a couple of weeks ago I spoke in Germany, and we feed the transcript into Virtual Chris. When I talk to our AI team, it gets uploaded, etc., etc. So that thing is extremely smart. It does things that I cannot do. How important do you think is that, now as AI matures and it's so easy, relatively easy to set stuff like that up for somebody who wants to sell their firm? Is that going to get them more money if they agree to that the new buyer has access to a virtual copy of them? Like, what's your take on that?
Man, that's really in the forefront. That I don't know. I
Uh-huh.
know that if a brand is heavily reliant on an individual person, usually part of the acquisition is going to request that person to work within the firm within 1, 2 to 3 years. And the
Oh, wow.
reason is to help be able to transition it to almost a new branding and have it being less reliant on that initial key player within the law firm. Um, so usually those are kind of like some of the things like, hey, we'll make this deal, but you have to stick around for this amount of years until the firm is fully transitioned to be under one specific umbrella. So I think even if you're trying to, duplicate that person, I mean, I think with AI, you can still say, well, I think in the future that would be possible because now you can have an AI version of that owner and still be a representation where the owner doesn't have to be there to be able to make those videos because now it's all going to be AI created. So it would be like the right to that AI for a specific period of time, I guess. So I do think that could be a possibility, but the problem is it requires years because branding takes time. It's consistency and repetition. It's kind of like brainwashing, right? It's consistency of the right message over time as much as possible, which will help people. It will drill that memory into people's mind so they can remember you. And the perfect example, which I think the law firm that does it the best, which is generating $1.5 billion dollars a year, it's Morgan and Morgan for the people. Like that is ingrained in my brain because I've heard so many of their commercial everywhere I go, billboards, and it's just consistency over time. And then it just sticks with you. So every time I'm going to think of a law firm, it's going to be Morgan and Morgan for the people. So it just takes time for you to break that. And it's also takes time to build. So a lot of law firms that I've worked with is there's a lot of inconsistency in their message. And each channel has a different experience. And then even the website has a different experience to the ads that they're exposing. And so the lack of congruency within all those different channels makes it difficult to build a clarity on who the business really represents because it's just lacks consistency and it reduces the chances of building trust. But if you're consistent, always the same messaging, always the same experience, then that's what drives and creates trust. That's what builds brand equity. And that's what's going to help you being less dependent on tactics and be able to be more dependent on the name of the company, which will help decrease your cost per acquisition over time.
All right, so let's move on to AEO, Answer Engine Optimization, and the 5 environment search reality. So how AI search has structurally recognized visibility and what it means for any business that isn't already adapting. Jason, again, all the information that I'm mentioning here, we're going to put the links right below in the description field of this YouTube video. Your AEO guide quotes Nathan Gotch's framing that SEO is now search everywhere optimization. I've been saying something similar for a while. The work is no longer ranking your URL in one search engine. It's making sure you're cited across an entire ecosystem. Talk me through the 5 environments you map, Jason.
So, and this is constantly really just changing at this point. But yeah, so when you're looking at search today, I think the way you have to look at it is authority. And so you have to just build authority. And the more authority you have, the more you're going to be validated through a variety of different channels, such as Chat, GPT, and all those different AI platforms. And so most of the time is if you're focusing on 1 or 2 locations, and you can do that really well, it's just not enough anymore. You have to be across the board because each individual areas, for example, ChatGPT or those types of AI platforms will help try to validate who you are based on the authority level that you have. And so your authority is being built based on all those different variants and you showing up into a variety of different places compared to just 1 or 2. So for example, if you have 2 law firms that are competing for attention and then one is a little bit everywhere, where one is very focused on 1 or 2, well, the chances of that person to be exposed across a variety of different areas will most likely drive that authority. And there's a bunch of different variables. Like SEO is not my top expertise. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be an expert in it. But really the key thing here is you have to optimize across the board and you have to do things consistency across the board. That's going to help drive that authority level up, which will help drive more exposure to your website.
Absolutely. I mean, the 2 of the most important ranking signals, not just for law firms, for anybody who wants to rank in traditional Google search, AI overviews, and other large language models, right? It's the domain authority of the website. The more it's being trusted by these search engines, the better the chance that you're going to rank. And then the individual, what we call EEAT score of the person associated with the content that's being published. It stands for experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And I mean, we see it all the time when I talk with potential new clients, including many, many law firms, right? There's no author associated with blog posts. It's just like very, very basic stuff. So I couldn't agree more. One thing that is not only happening with law firms, but across many industries, one stat in your guide that I noticed, 70 to 80% of legal queries projected to be 0-click by the end of 2026. Can you just explain for people that don't know what that is? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so there is a lot to unpack here. So the way I look at it is you have the different stages of the buying decision-making process. You have the upper funnel, which is more like the awareness stage where people are trying to identify their problem. You have the middle funnel, and then you have the lower funnel, which is going to be much more transactional. That means they've already done their research, they've already figured out what they're looking for, and they're now looking for the law firms that's going to help solve their problems. But when it comes to like before, the way they used to do it is we used to do tons of different content pieces that's trying to target certain sets of questions that people would be asking Google to help them find the solution. And then people would go through the list and then identify and then click on a couple of pages that are claiming to answer those questions and then reviewing it on their own. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Now, the way the system works and how AI works is that now people are asking those questions within this platform, and AI is providing a summary based on the research and how, like, what most people are agreed upon, and then give you those types of results. So, when you're searching to have some of those questions answered, it's going to be heavily taken care of by things like Gemini search results or ChatGPT search results. But when it comes to transactional, and let's say you ask your AI platforms like, hey, what's the best law firm for divorce lawyers, let's say in Denver, Colorado, then it's going to start focusing on where it's been pulling all those types of resources, who has been right the most times and has been validated, and who is really showcasing a high level of authority, and they will recommend that company over the others. So that's why I say that a large majority of what a lot of people has been ranking for is going to be significantly decreasing. A lot of the awareness and the awareness stage of the buying cycle stages when it comes to answering questions, that's going to be picked up by AI, which is a large majority of your traffic. And then now in the future, what you're going to see is your organic traffic, it's going to have a higher conversion rate because now people are finding you much more towards the lower bottom part of the funnel, which is much more transactional. So even though you might have a decrease in your traffic to your website, you'll have an increase in conversions based on that 20% of that traffic that you used to have before. And we're already seeing those trends that, organic traffic's conversion rates are progressively increasing because you're targeting now a much lower funnel types of audience when it comes to organic. And so you're going to start seeing even an increase in revenue based on your organic search compared to, what you used to have. So you might have less click, but you might drive more revenue.
Yeah, I mean, actually it holds true for us, for my business, Boulder SEO Marketing. Last Friday, I did 4 sales calls. 3 out of those leads, they found us on ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, etc. Only 1 through traditional, right? Google, the big one. Yeah, so that's absolutely true. Last question in this section here. Across the AI platforms, citation behavior diverges wildly. Your guide mentions, if I noted that down correctly, a 615 times difference between Grok and Claude on the same brand. How are you handling multi-platform tracking if you do that for your clients without losing your mind? I know it's something like even we struggle with. How do you approach that topic, maybe more on a global scale?
Well, when it comes to tracking, it's very difficult. And really, the key thing is about your top priorities. And so usually what I'll look at is, what are some of the areas? Because the thing is, it depends on what part of the business they're in. If they are a massive company, then they should have the people and the systems to be able to track each individual channel, each individual AI channels, to be able to really identify, because they have a massive amount of volume and they have the team able to do it. When it comes to, let's say, a medium-sized law firm or a small-sized law firm, we have to pick and choose and identify what are the areas that matters to us the most, and then focus on those areas, and then over time progressively expand to those up and coming types of platforms, and be able to see like what kind of traffic you're driving by which platforms. I don't really have a good answer when it comes to really identifying, be able to identify which platform is driving what traffic at this point in time. I think it's just very difficult to track. There's certain ways you can do it, but it's difficult to track right now.
Yeah,
So I
I
would pick
mean,
the top 3, 4, and then that's it.
I agree. Even we still struggle. Tools are getting better and better. I do like SE ranking. It's my favorite tool. They just up their game, AI search tracking. But again, it's really actually hard and challenging. Hey, let's dive into the last section 4. Let's talk money. The fractional CGO model and what founders get wrong. All right. You're charging, I believe, in the range of like 10 to 16, 17, 18K a month for fractional CGO work. That's premium pricing, right? That's not for everybody. What does a founder get from you that they can't get from a marketing agency?
Yeah. So the way we position ourselves is, and I know like there's a lot of agencies, it's like, we know we're trying to partner with our client. But my goal is to, like I said, it's to get to achieve the dreams of my client. So there's a couple of things to unpack here because that's a hard question to answer. If you're looking at the average case value of a law firm, usually, let's say for family law, you're looking at $13,000 to $15,000. And then if you're looking for a personal injury law firm, you're looking also at $32,000 to $55,000. So if you're looking at my prices compared to the amount of revenue they can generate by just increasing their amount of clients signed, let's say only by one, it's already getting paid for. I mean, obviously there's costs and things like that. But when it comes to relative to their business and their revenue, it's very minimal. In addition to that, for someone with my set of skills, 20-year doing this and dedicating my life towards my career, with countless amount of certifications, with multiple masters, and been in the business for quite some time, with also experience within the legal industry, which is actually very hard to find. If you're hiring a CMO or a CGO, you're looking at spending 190 to $250,000 per year, plus you have bonuses, plus you have benefits, you have all those different things. So now you're paying a much lower price for having someone that may feel like it's full time, but is giving you the insight and that knowledge that has been acquired over a prolonged period of time at the fraction of the cost. And the key benefit is before that was not really available. You had to be able to afford a CGO to be able to basically to get that knowledge to be working on your behalf. Now you don't have to because maybe your firm is not yet ready for a full-time person, but you can still have access to that knowledge and that experience so they can help you get to where you need to go. And really the key benefit here is you're having someone that's working part-time for your firm that's going to make all teams accountable, that's going to identify big problems within your revenue systems and address and fix those. So the way I work is, let's say you sign up for an engagement program, which is the most expensive, where I dedicate between 8 to 12 hours on a weekly basis towards your business. It's going to be heavily into like daily 15-minute stand-up meetings, strategy calls every so often. We tend to do 2-week sprints, which allows us to really focus and solve very key areas within your business within a very short period of time, making the team extremely focused on certain areas. And also the way I approach it is I try to identify very quickly low-hanging fruits. So for example, the first month is going to be very reliant on auditing your system. And that's going to be creating a flow of how the clients finds you all the way to how your sales team is converting them. And then on top of that, I have benchmarks numbers as well as how the top performers within the industry are performing. And so we can quickly identify the areas for improvement. So if your sales team is converting on average at 25%, where it should be around 50%, then I have a process and systems to give you to really help coach that team to get to those numbers. That could be a call quality system to be able to quickly identify based on the phone calls, recordings, what are they doing right, what are they doing wrong, and refine their talk track to make sure that they're increasing their conversion rate in a place where you don't even have to increase marketing expenses. We just have to tune up and fix a couple of things. Same thing with your intake process. So for example, the company I was working at, people would call and then they would reach the front desk. The front desk would identify, is this going to sales or intake? Is this going to a lawyer? Then they would push that person into the intake. Sometimes both intakes or all 3 intakes are busy. So then that person has to wait in line or wait until they have somebody on the call. Or sometimes we even just lose that call because they're spending too much time on the waiting. And then even so, there's a variety of different places where we can quickly identify fractures within your system, fix those. Let's say you have an AI platforms that can respond directly within 5 seconds of the phone calls and then schedule it with, qualify that lead and then schedule it with that sales team. That's going to increase your chance of converting that lead to over, I think it's like 387%. So by fixing some of those things that you have within your infrastructure, you can quickly see a significant increase in your results. In addition to that, we're building a foundation for scalability. And so the benefits that you're getting is for a fraction of the price, you have the knowledge, the expertise of someone that can really help you identify key problems that's holding you back. And like we said earlier, with the fragility, let's say you have your SEO is, you hired the wrong agency and it's creating this fragility or having all those bad reviews that are being put in place and you're not aware of it. Well, by trying to change that and fix those issues, then you're preventing potentially your business going down. So, long story short, it's a combination of safety, a significant amount of knowledge and resources that can help you get to where you're trying to go in the future.
Right. All right. So if a listener is running a business in the 2 to 50 million range and they want to start getting their house in order without hiring somebody like you yet, what are the first 3 structural moves you'd give them?
Especially if you're in the beginning stages, it's going to be heavily tactical. The thing is, what you have to understand is, first of all, what's your vision 10 years from now? And you have to be very clear and you have to write that information down. What that's going to allow you to do is set up the business in a way that's going to guide the business in the place that you want to go. That's going to be number one. Number two is how you're going to differentiate from your competitors. What makes you unique, and that could be you as a brand, and it could be like literally the story on how you got started or why you're passionate about family law or if you're passionate about personal injury, and then express the reasoning why you're in this business. That's going to create a more personable brand, and it's going to help people connect directly with who you are, and you're going to increase your chances of converting those individuals. And third, what I would recommend is start with paid search and invest money in your SEO strategy because that's going to help you significantly in the long term. In law firms, on average, they're saying that within a 3-year time period where you're investing money into your law firm, from an SEO standpoint, you're increasing the money that you're spending now. The return on investment is going to be 5 times 3 years from now when you invest heavily on SEO. So SEO is an important strategy, but it's also takes time. So having also paid search initiative done right is going to be very critical for your business to get started. And then in the future, I'm hoping to create an educational program that is going to be much lower cost. That's going to really help people, guide them on making the proper decisions for their business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the SEO side of things, right? That's what we do. It takes a little bit of time, but it's the gift that keeps on giving. All right, let's do a few rapid fire questions. Jason, wine or beer?
I'm French, so wine 100%, and European wine is my go-to.
Nice. Actually, what? We just came back from Switzerland and we went to
Oh,
a region where they have wine. It's really hard to find. I was able to buy a case Dole wine, Dole. So yeah, I'm a beer drinker, but I also love wine. Dogs or cats?
dogs,
All right. Beach or mountain?
definitely mountain. That's why I'm in Colorado. I love it here.
Nice. Indian or Chinese food?
I would say Indian. It's kind of
Claude
50-50.
or uh, Claude or ChatGPT or another large language model?
Claude 100% right now. I moved away
Agree.
from ChatGPT.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Jason, this has been an incredible conversation. What you're surfacing isn't a law firm story, it's a trust architecture story, and every business owner listening should be running the diagnostic you described before next quarter. The level of structural thinking you bring to this is rare, and I'm glad you're putting it into the world. Again, where
Thank
can
you.
people find you, subscribe to your content, and connect?
Yeah, so scalinglawfirms.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Just look at for Scaling Law Firms. I'm very heavy relying on LinkedIn just because I am a one-man show right now, but I am hiring a marketing assistant soon to help me manage all the initiative. But yeah, just research scaling law firms or scalinglawfirms.com. You'll definitely find me, or Google my name. You'll also definitely find me.
Awesome. And then again, all of the links, information about Jason right below in the description field of this YouTube video. Thank you so much.
I feel
As
you.
always, stay safe and healthy. Thank you so much for watching, your interest in this podcast. Jason, thank you so much. Until next time, thank you again for your interest in this podcast. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.